Good morning. If you're watching this, it's a good sign. That means she's running and running well. Let's see how she does. It's a bit of a mess in here today, but that's because I've been working on the Zenos. So last video we did the first shakedown at Roebling Road. Ever since then, it's been in the shop to finalize the alignment. We also got our custom brake pads in. Unfortunately, they did not put them on, so I have to go back and grab those. I am going to Mexico in 4 days, and there is a track day immediately upon my return. So I'm hoping to get this thing somewhat squared away and ideally sign up for that track day when I get back. Why are we on jack stands? Well, I'm troubleshooting a few different things. One, my brake lights, well, I did not know, but my brake lights are not working. And what tipped me off to that is this reverse light was not working. So I knew that wasn't working. I had no idea the brake lights weren't working until I got deeper into troubleshooting this. The other thing I noticed, which you'll see in a second, is when I picked the car up, the shop had the staggered setup backwards, which is very much unlike them. Quite frustrating. It did do some damage on the underside of the tub because obviously it was rubbing. On first look, I was really mad about that. This isn't a replaceable fender liner like most cars, so that's not good, very problematic. But after I calmed down a bit, it's not bad. I think some fine grit sandpaper and some paint, and that will be as good as new. But one thing I wanted to show you about the alignment specs is, as you can see up here in the control arm pivot points, there are a handful of shims on each pivot. So there are not centric bolts that can be quickly tuned and adjusted for a solid alignment. It's all based on shims. If we come to the back, you'll notice the same thing. It's even clearer. So the good thing about the shop is they do paint mark every bolt that they move and adjust. Same thing on the underside to know it's tight. They did corner balance it with my weight. And initially I thought that the rubbing was due to the front being slightly too low. But in the end, unfortunately, it was the staggered setup being backwards. So what are we doing? Troubleshooting the brake lights, hopefully fixing the reverse light here. You'll see that pesky isolator switch is out. A new one should be coming today, so I would like to fix that problem as well. And if we can do all of those things, she'll be good as new and ready to rock, I believe, for the track day. So let's get into it. The first thing I did when figuring this out is I came to the master harness. As you can see, hopefully you can see, up in the engine bay here. With the isolator, the car pretty much has to be running to fully diagnose these things. Otherwise, it'll cut the power off after about 30 seconds or so. But with the car running and that stick on the brake pedal, I was just testing each one of these connection points to see which one was getting power. At first, I felt like none of them were, which was kind of concerning, but I realized that the prongs on my voltmeter just weren't making good contact. So eventually, I had good contact. I grounded it off of the engine block, and I determined what most of these wires do. Now, I was getting power to the brake lights at this point, which is a great thing, because for those of you that don't know, these cars have a Willwood brake setup with not a pressure switch by the pedal, physical pressure, but hydraulic switch from the fluid. Let me show you. It is kind of difficult to get up within the footwell to adjust the pedal box. In fact, you can't even see the master cylinder from this angle. Let me see if I can show you with the GoPro. 1 second. Maybe you can see from that angle. Regardless, the main switch is, again, hydraulic pressure, and it bolts into the top of the master cylinder at the brake pedal up underneath the dash. So the only way to do it is to shove your head down in this hole with your back obviously to the floor upside down. It's very difficult to get in. It's even more difficult to get out. And if that switch was faulty, that would have been a hell of a time. But lucky for me, through some troubleshooting, it ended up being something within the harness. Again, we were getting power to this peg, but it was not coming through on the other side. As I was playing with it, I was moving the wire around, and I don't know if it's like this on all Zenos or just my chassis, but for the brakes, it is the green and blue wire right here on the top. I was moving that wire around, and then I noticed that panel started flickering. So there's a bad connection in this plug causing my lack of brakes. I'm hoping it's something similar for my reverse light on the driver's side. So what I'm gonna do is I've already cleaned the contact points. It has nothing to do with corrosion or anything of that nature. It is simply a bad contact on this peg. So I am gonna do my best to walk you through how to remove this peg, hopefully without breaking anything. It's been a while since I've touched anything like this, and we'll see if we can't get this permanently fixed. So stand by. For the sake of teaching you how I did this, and because I have the memory of a goldfish, I'm gonna reconfirm which one of those wires is the correct wire for the brake. So I'm gonna walk you through how to use the voltmeter, even though I could probably just jimmy that wire. We'll make sure it is that green and blue wire. It might be green and black, I can't recall. And then we'll go from there. So let's start the car. I was looking for these keys for like 10 minutes a second ago. Oh, isolator switch, engaged. One button for the security measure. Let the screens fire up. Then if everything goes to plan, we will start the engine. Hopefully it's not too loud and you can hear what I'm doing as I walk you through the process. First and foremost, we are going to turn our voltmeter on, 20 volts. Double checking the wires up here. There is a, let's see. There is a green and purple double wire coming into the second top port. That should be the brake lights if everything goes to plan. So we are going to put our positive lead into that port, and then be careful of the belts. I'm going to put the negative on the block because we know that's grounded. And we're getting 0 volts. So something is indeed not right. Either we got a bad lead or that brake light is not being pushed down, the brake switch. Brake pedal, excuse me. Still 0 volts. So let's double check our stick over here. Woo! Just messed up that pedal. The steering wheel was the softest thing I could find that wouldn't tear up the seat and would hold this firmly down. Come back around and retest. All right, let's try again. So positive lead, and what we believe to be the brake switch. It's grounded on the engine block, and sure enough, we have voltage. Now, knowing the color and knowing the switch, this green and purple wire here should be what turns on the brake lights. Let's see. Oh, see, right now we have steady lights. That's a good sign. But if I move the green and purple wire, you gotta be kidding me. Isn't that funny? It's working just fine right now. Where yesterday it was susceptible to disconnecting. Wow, that's steady Eddie. Let's see if our other lights are on. No, they're not. Now what would cause that? See if we got running lights. Now we only have one running light. So we have all kinds of issues, it looks like. Interesting. Okay. Saw something flicker. All right, now you see what I'm talking about. If I move this wire, it is flickering up top. So we definitely have a bad connection. Okay, so I just got the pin free. I'm learning lessons the hard way. A long time ago, I bought these keys that are meant to release all kinds of electrical connections. I was working on a VF1000R from the 80s. Those were a lot easier to come out than this particular harness. But let me show you what I did. Hopefully you don't make the same mistake. So first and foremost, here is the plug as it stands. This white piece has to come out to be able to access, you can kind of see in there, access the tabs that are holding each pin in. So the best thing to do when this is slid in is to take a dental pick. And what I did is I lifted up between the black plastic and the white plastic and shoved this within this groove and then just slightly pulled out, and that came out no problem. Where things became rather difficult was trying to lift, and you can see it's a bit mangled, lift the tab that's holding in the pin. I tried a few different devices, including some of these keys, but honestly, I don't know if that's just a cheap brand or if they're always like that, but they were a little flimsy. They just kept bending. What I ended up using was this tiny flathead screwdriver. It's probably still too thick, too big, which is what mangled this a bit, but by lifting the tab inside, this was able to slide out. Now, another thing that you should take away from this is on other wiring connections, I was able to pull these insulators out with a pick to get to the metal piece of the connector itself. That way I wouldn't strip the wire like you can clearly see I did here. That bothers me a lot. But with these, this insulator is crimped into the pin. So do not attempt that. You'll just rip it to heck and back, which unfortunately I also did. Now here's the problem, is this thing looks like it's pretty well crimped. So now I'm not convinced that the issue is the pin itself and the connection here, but I don't know, maybe it's the female end. I mean, it's hard to say. What do I just undo the whole connector to find the problem? Not fun. I mean, I guess temporarily option B is to hardwire these together and bypass the connector entirely until I can look at the whole harness. Tough call. Tough call. But anyway, don't use a pick for the insulator. You're just gonna rip it. Use the right tools to lift those tabs to pull it out if you need to fix a connection, but ultimately I don't think this is the problem. So what I thought was initially this connector, it may not actually be the problem. The crimp looks fine, and although wiggling it made the lights cut on and off, the more I've dove into this, the more there might be a bigger problem at play here, because weird stuff has been happening. If I have 13 volts coming from the main harness in the brake system, and I plug this back in, this goes down to 5 volts. Very strange. So I started unplugging the brake lights back here, the brake light on the driver's side, and the third central brake light, and that was activating the other two in some way, some capacity. If I remove the third brake light, just to repeat myself, these two come on. If I plug it in, these go off, and that goes very dim, and the voltage no longer comes to this brake wire. So what was happening is I was getting a different reaction each time, whether I had these two jumped and this plugged in, or these unplugged and this jumped, the taillights plugged in, unplugged. It was a different reaction, all things being equal. So I don't believe that the issue is necessarily just in this one brake line. But my next goal is to pull these two pins that were also getting 13 volts, pull the same two pins on the male side, and direct wire all three of them, just to eliminate the possibility that it is in the plug itself. So I don't know if that's the right way to go about this, but I'm getting weird readings based on the plugs being plugged in any given individual light, and the way these are connecting at the harness. Because they're not consistent no matter what I do, that's my next step. That's what I'm gonna try out. So
we'll see what happens. Okay, so we now have all 3 brake lines pulled out of the individual harnesses. All 3 brake pins, excuse me, on both sides. They're currently hardwired. I basically just put a jumper in between each one. I did label them so I know exactly where they go back. There's obviously some fault in one, if not multiple, of these individual pins. And so what I'm thinking temporarily is to just hardwire these together. I don't know when I would really have the need to undo that harness. Obviously it needs to come off if you're doing bigger work. It'd make things easier, but for the sake of having brake lights and knowing for sure they will be working at all times, I might just hardwire these lines, solder them together, put some shrink wrap and call it a day. At some point I would like to have the entire harness redone in mil spec. That way it's completely waterproof and you know, corrosion resistant and reliable for starters. So that's where things stand. I did uncover the issue. It's one of those 3 wires. Again, things were acting really funny. So for now, I think I'm gonna hardwire them together, solder them up and put some shrink wrap and tape over them and see how that lasts. That'll at least get me through the next track session, and then we'll go from there. All right, here goes nothing. Let's see if she works. Isolator on. I'm just gonna power up first to check on the reverse light so that the wheels don't go in motion on jack stands. Boom, boom. Ooh, all 3 brake lights work. If you want to see the final product, got everything nice and zip tied as it was previously. Here's the original clip. Here are my 2 lines coming in from behind. I made them a little bit longer so that I can still disconnect this and separate things without the new wires getting hung up. And I also put an additional zip tie on that connector. But overall, if you don't go messing with these wires, nobody would ever know that that had been done. We would just have functioning lights, which have now cut off. They still work. They just cut off because I did not start the car in time. So I hope that helps anyone else that's in this scenario. Next step, I just got a new isolator switch in the mail, waterproof, better quality. I'm gonna change this one out and hopefully I won't have that clicking or lack of clicking moving forward. That's why you keep hearing the relay cutting on and off, because that is malfunctioning. Keep you posted.